Good evening and welcome to the Finance, Budget and Personnel Committee meeting of Tuesday, May 18th, 2021. We are called to order. The first thing on the agenda is to identify any potential conflicts of interest. You've seen the packet. Is there anything in there you feel uncomfortable with or any conflicts you feel necessary to expose? Seeing none, we'll move on to the citizens' comments. Are there any citizens who wish to make comments? If so, please come to the podium, give your name and address, and we will allow you to speak. I don't see any citizens coming and rushing forward to the podium, which is always a good sign, actually. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. And on the consent agenda are the minutes of the May 4th, 2021 meeting, the monthly position control report, the report on personnel actions, and bills and payroll. What was your pleasure?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Peschel to approve, second by Spiros. Discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? The consent agenda is approved. Next up is the update on potential decline in property values presented by Jim Toth. Is that correct, Jim?
Yes.
Okay. And you are our city assessor, and Jim, welcome, and the podium is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me a few moments to update you on what may happen in the future, what has happened already. Thank you, sir. The document that Keith is giving you just has some information you can look over, throw in the trash when you're done, or hang on to it, whatever you'd like to do with it. A lot of it is projected information, and so Steve asked if I would come and just talk about what potential declines we may have, because he and I have spoke about what kind of value things might be going on. But in that tabbed report that you have there, if you would turn to tab number 6, I'll start off with some good news, and that is that it looks like we have new construction, which is on the right-hand side of that tab of that report. In the column labeled 2 and 3, higher land use, new plats, new improvements, and new construction. You see a number there at the bottom of that, about $48 million. That's what the tax roll will increase from the new construction, things we have found that weren't previously on the tax roll, and so on and so forth. So that's good news. That's up substantially from the prior year, where we had about $19 million of new construction. So if you're familiar with the net new construction terminology, and Ron can probably fill you in on what happens there, but the state allows you to increase your budget based on the net new construction, or 2%. And again, Ron can probably fill you in on something like that. Anyhow, that's the only piece of good news that I actually have for you. So now, if you want, I can leave, or I can continue. So the bad news starts from there, because, as you know, we've had a number of requests for exemptions from Marshfield Clinic for the hospital use of the clinic area. Thus far, they have not completed an application that was approved by myself. You know, like any entity, they're allowed to file for an exemption request. We don't deny them the opportunity to do that. They just have not proven that the area that they deem that should be exempt complies in any way. So at some point, we anticipate, this is the 3rd year they've been trying to exempt some property. At some point, they likely will provide an application that will be approved. What does that mean for us? The last tab that you see, number 7, if you would turn to that and look at the column on the left-hand side labeled property now exempt or assessed as personal property, you see a very huge number there of $112 million. That would come off the assessment roll should they be given their exemption. Even though our value is $1.5 billion, it still would have an impact on local taxes. Again, you know, we're doing everything we can to comply with the law and statutes to prevent the property from becoming exempt, but I anticipate, since they've been working for 3 years, that they will continue that. In addition to that, if you look at tab number 3, which is our current personal property side, because up till now I've been talking about the real estate. So if we look at the personal property for 2021, the value of that has dropped about $7.9 million. $5.9 million is directly from the settlement with the clinic, where we lost value due to that. If the real estate that I talked about, that $112 million, were to become exempt, there would be another about $4 million that would come off of personal property that would be exempt as well. So I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you, and none of them are real good numbers, but again, I was asked to come here and give you the bad news, so that's kind of what I'm doing. Again, I think new construction is going to be up certainly next year and the year after. There's really a desire for building. We have a lot of partial things going on in the city, so there will be an increased value. I don't know that we'll have enough to offset a very large decrease due to an exemption, should that happen. Again, nobody knows if that'll happen or not, but I anticipate that the hospital clinic will not cease attempting to get property exempted. With that, I have opportunity to answer some questions if I can, if you have any.
Anybody? So in terms of the taxes collected, what is the actual, the dollar value do you expect that to have on our tax revenue?
For 2021, I am hopeful that these numbers will not be put into place. Our board of review is slated for late June, and so there is still time for some event to happen that would cause that reduction to happen this year. I'm hopeful that for 2021, the $1.5 billion of local assessed value would hold true. Is that answering your question?
Only partially. What kind of event would make that happen?
If they were granted an exemption, if they came through with a properly completed exemption that I accepted, then I would have no choice but to take it off the assessment roll. And Ron can probably tell you what 112 million would do.
Yeah, Ron, could you help me with that?
Sure, and I guess an important part of this is the way the levy limits work, it's based on dollars levied. So we always talk about percentages and assessed value, but the levy limits limit how much we can collect in tax revenue. So in the case that something would come off the books, regardless of how large it is, we can still levy legally the same amount of dollars plus the net new construction. So essentially, if say we needed last year's tax levy plus 3%, the tax base goes down substantially. We can still levy for it. What it's doing is essentially transferring the burden of that amount from the properties that are exempt onto the remaining non-exempt properties. So that's, just wanted to point that out. So that's how it works.
So,
and then the $110 million, holding everything equal, looking at the 2021 tax calculations, would bring, if we held the amount of dollars we needed even, would bring the rate up at least 8%. So it's pretty significant.
Yeah, it would actually be about a $1.2 million loss in tax revenue from, roughly, as I recall, looking at it from the $112 million or whatever that reduction is.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
And that's what I'm trying to clarify is that,
That's something like 9 mils, is that 9 point some mils?
Yeah, or 8 or whatever Ron said, maybe you've calculated what that would be.
Well, I mean, oh yeah, okay, go ahead.
yeah, and so, and I guess it's two different things is, one, we can still levy the same amount, the rate just goes up. So what Steve's saying is if we would decide not to just take that completely as a hit to our budget, it would be the dollar amount he said.
Okay, and one last question for Jim, and I don't know if I misunderstood you or what, but you said you're hoping the Board of Review would find some event that would delay this. What kind, that's the kind of event I was asking. What is that event?
Well, this would not be a Board of Review action, but by the Board of Review, if we were to be given an application for exemption that would pass all of the statutory requirements, we would have to then honor that request, which would then take off this $112 million. The Board of Review occurring means that once that occurs, I can't make a change anymore. I can't exempt it. They would have to, the clinic would have to come back and ask like they did this year for money back from, and I don't know what the amount was off the top of my head, but they came back and requested money to be returned to them that they felt was not, should not have been taxed to them last year. So the event that kind of sets this all into motion is the Board of Review, because after that point in time, I cannot make a change. After that point in time, then it has to go to a different a different process for the, it could end up exempt, but it would still have to go through a different process.
And Ed, if I could just add to that for a second. One of the things I didn't know until recently, I don't know, recently, a few months ago or whatever, it's not necessarily an all or nothing. In other words, portions of the building could be found to be exempt and others not. So it's not like the entire $112 million of those two parcels is either going to be kept on the rolls or not. It could be some mix and match.
That is correct. Currently, and in all of the requests that they've made, it's been for the whole building. But there is a case to be made that some of the areas would not be exempt under any circumstances. Again, we would have to have a proper filing in order to make that determination.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions? If not, is this, there's not any actual action required on this, except exceed, I would accept a motion to receive and place on file. Motion by Spiro, second by Ashel, to receive and place on file the report.
Thank you very much for
All in
your time.
favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Next up, request to fill vacant recreation manager position. This would be Justin.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Kelly Cassidy is retiring from her position as the recreation manager with the city of Marshfield after 31 years of employment. Kelly's last day of work will be August 16th. On behalf of the Parks and Recreation Department and the city, I want to thank Kelly for her commitment and dedication to the community and residents of Marshfield. The recreation manager plays a significant role in the department. The position oversees all recreation programs and activities, including the front office, the senior center, special events, the seasonal brochure, ice rinks, field reservations, manages and supervises the Vanda Hay Waters Aquatic Center. Vanda Hay Waters is scheduled to open in July, so it's imperative this position gets filled quickly. Not replacing the recreation manager will severely impact recreation services to the community. Enclosed in the packet is the job description for the recreation manager with a few changes noted in yellow and a few noted in red. It is my recommendation to the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee to authorize the Parks and Recreation Department to fill the vacant recreation manager position.
What's your pleasure?
Move to fill the position.
Motion by Paschal, second by Wetzel to fill the position, to authorize him to start filling the position. Discussion? Mr. Wetzel?
Thank you. It sounds like you're looking at filling this as quickly as possible, so there'll be a significant amount of time of overlap.
Kelly's last day in the office is scheduled for July 9th.
So there's not a lot of overlap.
Do we not a lot,
Okay.
if any? Well, best case scenario, 60 days, most likely 90 days, so probably zero overlap.
Okay, so just out of curiosity, do you think you've got some potential internal applicants, or is this
No.
pretty much out?
Right now, it's a really standalone position. It's not like she has a ton of full-time or permanent part-time individuals. They're mostly young. They're not always young, very part-time tennis instructors, golf
Very seasonal.
instructors. Very seasonal,
Okay.
very young, nothing internal, so it'll be most likely an external candidate.
Okay, thank you, that's all I had.
Doesn't mean that no one can apply internally, just we don't have anyone planned, so I don't want to make that perception there.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Next up, request to reduce hold time for impounded animals from 7 days to 4 days, presented by Steve Bart. Steve?
Thank you, and I'll present, and then we have Karen Ralph from MAPS and Bob Larson, our longtime outstanding ordinance officer. No, you do an amazing job and have for a long time, Bob. Feels good to say that publicly, and Karen, you've done a great job with MAPS over the last decade or so. For those of you who were on the council 5 years ago, this is a rerun. We had this conversation back in 2016. You may recall back in 2015, the state passed a Wisconsin Act 233 that reduced the hold from 7 days to 4 days for impounded animals, but it was permissive. In other words, it didn't require that cities and villages adopt that. They could certainly stay with 7 days, but they were allowed to go to 4 if they wanted to, if they felt it was appropriate. So we had the conversation at that time, and there was some support, as I recall, from a couple places to look at doing that. But both Karen and Bob, on behalf of our city staff, felt it was not the time to do it. MAPS was fairly new in trying to get itself established in terms of processing stray animals. And there was a thought, was 4 days long enough to find the owners of stray dogs and stray cats? And again, it doesn't require that after 4 days you take some certain action, but allows you to if you want to move forward with the adoption process or, theoretically of euthanizing as well. Now here we are 5 years later, and I've definitely got the impression from both of the individuals here today that it probably is the right thing to do now. That MAPS is much more established. They're much better at being able to handle the load. They've got staff. They've got a new building. They've become pretty efficient in terms of processing stray animals, and that the fear that it's not enough time to find an owner is really not there anymore. This is probably for the best to allow that opportunity to take action after 4 days of impoundment. So with that in mind, staff is recommending that the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee recommend council approval to, this would require an ordinance change, by the way. So I'm just asking whether or not you want to direct this to council to begin that process. But the staff be directed to do an ordinance amendment for first reading on June 9th to reduce the hold time to 4 days.
Discussion? Or basically, I'd like a motion if you got one. You have a motion, Mr. Whittle?
No.
Anybody have a motion?
I'll make a motion to.
Motion by Paschal, second by Spiros.
And your motion is to
Now-
reduce it?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. How many pets are we talking about on an annual basis are captured stray pets that this would be impacting? It's for the folks for the benefit of the folks at home.
I think it's like around 350 cats a year.
And dogs.
And dogs. The percentage of what is returned is low, especially when it relates to cats. Dogs usually probably, and I'm going right off the top of my head, I don't have those numbers actually right in front of me, but it's probably 95% of dogs that come in are going back to owners. When you relate that to cats, it's probably 11%. It's low. I had sent an email to Steve regarding this as well, which I think is in your packet. The animals that are legal are actually pets per se, where owners are actually coming in for them. Cats are spending 1.4 days in MAPS before they're picked up by their owners, and dogs are spending like about a half a day. Those are the reasons why we're thinking that this is a good time to do this. There's no reason to hold on to them for 7 days and then, let them sit there stressing out. The longer they're there, also they get medical problems. They don't want to be in these cages. It's bad for them.
Do we have any idea what kind of a cost impact this would have by changing it from 7 to 4?
That kind of goes in with ties in with the next part on the agenda. I don't know if we want to go right there?
Yeah, we'll talk about their new contract in a minute. I mean, if in fact the fees are increased in the way that they're asking for, the net result is pretty negligible. It's almost a wash. By itself, I'm not sure how many dogs or cats spend days 5, 6, and 7 at your facility that we get billed for. That would be the difference in savings by itself.
Okay.
And it's not many. When the dogs that are spending more time there are a custody issue where, as of late, it's somebody who's going to the mental institution in Norwood or the hospital and they're just not getting out, or they've been arrested. Those animals are spending more time at the shelter. Cats as well as dogs, for that matter, in that respect. But for the most part, we don't have a lot of those cases, but they do happen.
Okay. And I guess I just have one more kind of side question to go down. Excuse me. We know, of course, that microchipping is pretty common, at least for a lot of pet owners. Is there a situation still where the microchipping is company specific when you're trying to scan a pet? Or is there a way to know if a pet's been microchipped that you can't scan? Do you have a universal scanner that scans all brands? Where are we at with that?
I know the police department, the ordinance department has a universal scanner.
Okay.
I know MAPS does. There's a program that we go onto when we know that it's got a microchip. All we got to do is put in the microchip number. It tells us who the company is and what number to call from there. Okay. It narrows it down quite well.
And then to go along with that microchipping discussion, do you have an idea of the percentage of the strays that are not microchipped at this point? I mean, cats, it sounds like pretty rarely to be microchipped, but for dogs, do you have any percentage?
It's low.
But it's increasing because every returned pet to their owner gets a free microchip from us. So the frequent flyers that are coming in are getting scanned and they're getting returned right away because they came in before and they got a microchip. So we're increasing that because of the service.
So currently, it's a low percentage of people that are microchipping, but through a service that you're providing, that is increasing. Mm-hmm. And then I guess to go along with the microchipping as well, I have a little bit of concern if a person is on vacation and their pets are microchipped and they don't return home for a week, what happens then? I mean, is that a situation where you've identified the owner, therefore you're keeping the pet until the owner returns home, or how is that happening then?
So, we talked about that, and we always work with individuals. If they contact us within that 4-day stray hold, and then just let us know what the situation is, then we're not going to get that animal spayed and neutered and get ready for adoption. So we'll just hang on to that pet until they get back from vacation or wherever they are. Really the idea between the 4-day stray hold from our point of view is that at least on day 5, then we can start getting them in for surgery and getting them ready for adoption versus waiting the 7 days, which adds the extra stress, as Bob was saying, so that we can expedite the animals out the door faster. But we always work with owners when it comes to their pets. You know, in a situation like that, we've had pet owners come in and say on day 8 or 9, saying, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know you guys existed. That's my cat." And we already had it spayed and neutered. Then we just treat it as an adoption, and nobody has ever balked at that at all, because now they have a fully vaccinated, microchipped, and spayed and neutered pet, and they return them back home. So we're always willing to work with owners. The idea is to get the pets back to their owners. So.
Okay, I have nothing further. Thank you.
So you want to go hold, it used to be, we paid you a set fee, I think it was for 7 days, it was $7 or $9 a day?
7 for cats
7
and 13 for
cats
dogs.
And how much, I'm sorry?
13.
13 for dogs. Do you have any idea what you charged us for holding animals last year?
It's a good question again.
I didn't bring that spreadsheet, but it was around, it's usually around between $10,000 and $13,000 a year. That sound right?
Yeah, because depending on the month, you know, you're coming into our busy season now. We can have a month like in February where it's literally $300-400. And now that's going to go up to anywhere near like 12 to 1500.
Do we pay you monthly? You bill us monthly on that?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
So the question before us at the moment is to whether or not to recommend an amendment to the ordinance to the common council that would change it from 7 days to 4 days. Is that correct? And that is the motion we've got from Mr. Paschal and the second by Mr. Wetzel. Right, or Ms. Spiros, I'm sorry. But you want to speak again?
Yeah, just for clarification, this is to draft the amendment that then is going to go in front of the entire council. We're not making the decision here.
Right.
No, the intent, Tom, is that this would be on the consent agenda just as a conceptual approval to move forward. The first and second readings of the ordinance would be the 9th and 23rd of June.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. And let's see, you didn't lose your turn. You're still up.
Just stay ready.
The next thing on the agenda is request to approve new contract with Marshfield Area Pet Shelter, MAPS, for services related to the impounded animals. You want to give us a presentation before I ask for discussion? Or ask for a motion? Go ahead.
I was going to start just to give some context, and then if they want
Go
to
ahead.
comment, if that'd be good.
Go ahead.
I'm just really going to kind of highlight a little bit from my memo. The city has contracted with MAPS for a number of years for services related to animal impounds. The most recent contract was signed effective July 1, 2017. You may say that's been 4 years, but there have been no changes of substance since then to prices or anything else. So that contract, as written, stays in effect from year to year. And until now, when MAPS is asking for a new agreement. And it's in your packet. There are some fee increases, and they are of some note. Would be from $7 for a cat to $13, and from $13 for a dog to $23. So you're talking about, somewhere upwards of 80% increase. The issue, and I imagine this will be the conversation we're going to have here, is the level of care that MAPS provides. And in terms of medical care, vaccinations, microchipping, MAPS is dedicated to trying to find homes for the animals, place the homes if in fact they're unclaimed. And those types of treatments, not only do they help the animals at the time that they're under impound, but they also are beneficial to them if they do go back to the owner or if they end up needing another home somewhere else. So again, I've run this by the ordinance officers. Bob Larson, similar to the last agenda item, wrote an email on this one as well, indicating basically that, nobody likes to see fee increases, but that they're probably warranted under the circumstances given the level of service provided by MAPS. So this is presented for your consideration tonight. Staff would recommend the same as the last item, approval, a recommendation by this committee for council approval. And again, Karen and Bob are here to answer any questions about the contract or anything related to it.
Okay, I'll ask for a motion from the floor. Anybody have a motion? The motion would be to accept the increase in pay from $7 a day for cats and $13 a day for dogs, up to $13 for cats and $23 for dogs.
Right, and in this case, it would be for the entire contract. Not much has really changed for the rest of the contract, truthfully.
I don't think, are the services any different? The services are still the same as they were in the old contract, isn't that correct?
Right, but you're gonna be shortening the stray hold, so instead of paying for 7 days at that rate, you're only be paying for 4.
There's not a lot of difference between 49 and 52.
Right.
So basically, for 4 days, you're getting the same, actually more than you would have gotten for 7 under the old contract.
If you look at the 4 days, at the $13 per cat versus the $7 per 7 days, the amount is a difference of what? $1, $3?
Something like that.
But the
49
difference
and
is they're only
52.
staying for 4 days
So it'll
and
be
not
3
for
days.
7.
Oh yeah, $3. So the old fees for the cats was, if they stayed for 7 days, was $49. The new fee for 4 days is $52. So it's a $3 difference. And for the dogs, it was 91 before, it would be 92. So it's a $1 difference.
I think, Ed?
The number of days is shortened, but you're getting roughly the same amount of money. Go ahead, Steve. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed. And I'm not here to make their case, they are, but I think the crux of their argument is not that they're going to provide these new services. These are services you've been providing.
Correct.
And, are finding out that the fees probably are warranted, the increase is perhaps warranted.
Right, yeah. Again, we were so new at the time. We signed the cat contract in 2015. At that time, we had no staff. And then we signed the dog contract in 2017. I think we had 1 staff member at the time. So at the time, we were just guessing at what we felt, would be a fair fee for the city. But after we realized, we hired a medical coordinator, both of them are vet techs, and they can provide a better service to these animals and get more medical done for them. Plus, we compared our rates with another shelter, Portage County, and then we considered what the boarding facilities around us are getting per day. And to us, there was room for improvement. So for what we were providing to the city is why we felt it was a time to address raising our fees, because we think that we were pretty lowballed before, we lowballed ourselves, so.
The cost of medications, off the top of my head, I cannot tell you what that is. But over the last 4 years, I can assure you it probably went up, like everything else. The animals that are coming in are initially getting minimally a dewormer. It's also something that acts as a flea, it's the word I'm looking for, deterrent, I guess. If they've got the fleas, it'll also kill the fleas. Why do we give that? Because if you don't do something about fleas, it's gonna infest the entire place. We've seen cats come in that have been so ridiculous with fleas that it'll make your head spin. You're paying for the cost of that. You're paying for somebody like Caitlin and Holly to administer that versus us taking that cat to a vet. And in my email, I touched briefly on what the cost is gonna be if you go to a vet for something like this. It's astronomical. It will suck the life out of anybody's budget. And you guys know more than I do about that. We don't have a ginormous budget when it comes to animal care, taking an animal to a vet. We would exhaust that, I guarantee you, in the month of January. If we had to take those animals to a vet to get all this kind of stuff done. We've got 2 people who are qualified to do it, are working under a vet's discretion with some of these other items. And if they're willing to do that for the cost that they're willing to do this for, I don't think it's a bad thing. Especially when you think about what vet bills are now. You're gonna pay $50 to walk in the door right now just because of, it's probably what, $17, $18 for an office visit. They throw in little things like biomedical disposals. They're gonna charge you $3 to take your needle and put it in the garbage. It's huge. And we get this service for a lot less.
Ms. Spiros, did you have something?
Yes. So, in looking at the contract, I think that we're looking at a fee for what's listed under number 3 as A, strays. Did we up the cost of the quarantine fees or the seized or custody fee also in this contract?
Yeah, that's a little bit higher for that service. And Bob can speak on those type of animals that would come.
That would be kind of the people that I had mentioned before, if they're going to Norwood or they're in the hospital or they get incarcerated. We know that they're gonna have to pay us, or at least we hope they do. We have had people that have not, but there's recourse that we can do to get that as well, by issuing a citation and requesting restitution. Those instances, we know who the owner is.
Mm-hmm.
We absolutely know I shouldn't say absolutely, we are more comfortable with getting money from them because we know who they are.
And how much did those go up?
If I'm reading this right, it looks like it's $15 a day for cats and 25 for dogs.
And what were they previously for, so I see the contract, it says 15 per day under quarantine, 15 per day for a feline, 25 for a canine. What was the previous contract for quarantine?
It was $7 for cat and 13 for dog.
Oh, so there's always the same number.
The same numbers, right?
Yeah.
Right, we just
the old
never
contract,
spelled
everything
it
stayed the
out
same.
in there. We lumped them under strays in our previous contract because there was never verbiage that specified quarantine or custody cases in the old contract.
Okay, so in the old contract, everything was $7 per day for a cat, 13 for a dog.
Right.
And now you just kind of broke that down to A, B, and C, and,
Mhm.
okay, got you.
Quarantine issues are stressful in a lot of ways also, not only for the animal, that they're spending time away from their house because they bit, or in the case of a cat, bit or scratched somebody.
Right.
They're there for 10 days automatically if they don't have a vaccine that is up to date. There's no getting around that. That's a state law.
And that's, following up on Ms. Spiros's question, and in B and C, under that same thing, there's no limit for either a quarantine or a seized in custody.
A quarantine is 10 days.
What?
A quarantine is 10 days?
Yeah, it's 10 days, but there's no limit. I mean, it doesn't, so if it's 10 days for a cat that's picked up as a stray, or, well, let's say seized or in custody, the one that you were just talking about, if they scratched somebody or bit somebody. So it's $15 a day for the duration of the custody period, and that's 10 days. So we're gonna pay $150 for that cat.
The owner is.
The owner is.
If we know who the,
How are we on collections from those owners? If that's a citation, isn't it? That's
no. No, they have to pay us upfront before they can get their animal, or they can sign a contract that states they can get their animal back right away without paying us anything, but they sign on the dotted line stating that they have X amount of time to pay that money back to us. If they choose not to, then we cite them and then we request restitution.
And what, is that also in, what was that C, the seized and custody in the current contract? Because these are all the new numbers you've put in here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what was it under the other contract?
Right, the old contract did not specify the seized in custody.
So
We
this
didn't
is
have
brand
that
new.
verbiage
So this
in
is
the
an
old.
additional cost.
Yeah, we're specifying that. We provided that service before, that they would bring us seized custody and quarantine cases, but it was never spelled out in the old contract. And that's why we're just adding this verbiage and being more specific about the fees, because that verbiage was never in the old contract, but we were providing the service.
So there's more than just those two fees changed. Okay, I'm gonna ask again, Mr. Passion.
I just want to say that, I think that, we have a significant investment as a city in the MAPS facility. And part of the reasoning for that was that we would use that facility as our impound for stray animals. Bob is entirely correct. If we went somewhere else with our stray animals, it would cost us a lot more than what MAPS is charging us for the same services that we may not require all of those services, but probably most of them we would require from a veterinary service. So I'm willing to make a motion to recommend council approval for a new MAPS contract.
With those numbers in them, right?
Yes, as written.
Is there a second? Second by Ms. Spiros. Let me ask, what other sources of income do you have other than city? Well, I know you do I know you do a walk, Brittany's Walk or something like that for animals, the fundraiser once a year or something like that?
Oh, yeah, we have 4 fundraisers a year. We have donors, we have other contracts with municipalities. We have the Village of Spencer, Township of McMillan, Township of Richfield, expecting Township of Lincoln and Rock to be signed shortly. So those are some more contracts that we want, that we have and we want. There's more that we want to provide this opportunity, so that's
Which ones do you have
revenue.
and which ones do you want? I mean, how many do you have?
Those are the ones that we have right now. Marshfield, Spencer, McMillan, Richfield, and then I'm expecting Lincoln and Rock.
Ms. Spiros?
So in follow-up, is the contracts, the contract amounts with all of those places the same as what you're proposing with the city of Marshfield?
The Village of Spencer is set up like the city because we're dealing with law enforcement, and Chief Bauer wanted his contract with Spencer to be like the city of Marshfield. The other municipalities, they are flat fees of $50 for cats and $90 for dog, which means on day one, they are our sole ownership of those. And then we try to find the owners for the 4 days and get them ready for adoption.
So that's pretty in line with the new proposed fees that you're giving,
Right.
or showing us. I mean, that's basically the same. So I had one more question, but it just flipped right out of my head, so
Well, if you're thinking about it, I'll ask Mr. Wetzel to give us what's in his head.
Thank you. A couple of things. There is, I mean, as Mr. Barg mentioned, this is like an 80% increase. You're cutting your time essentially in half and still charging more. So it's a sticker shock is kind of hard, and I could see, you know, multi-year certain increase each time, you know, each year over a period of time. That I think is a little easier to swallow than we're cutting how long we're keeping the pets in half, but we're going to charge you more. It's hard. A couple of things kind of stuck in my head as you were explaining. You were comparing to the cost of boarding, and I struggle a little bit with the fact that you're housing stray pets and you're charging boarding fees. To me, if as a pet owner, if I'm taking my pet to a boarding kennel, I'm expecting a certain level of care that I don't necessarily expect that a stray pet's gonna get. And maybe you're providing a posh situation. I don't know, maybe that's a little overkill. Maybe we don't need to provide such a posh situation for the pets. They're strays. I don't know. The other thing that stuck in my head is that you're talking about what the vet techs are doing, and it sounded like they're primarily applying a topical flea and tick medicine, which I think any pet owner without any kind of licensing or education or certification can do themselves. So I guess I'm kind of curious, what else are the vet techs doing that require the level of certification and education that is being provided at the pet shelter?
They're providing a whole intake exam. So they're listening to their heart, looking at their ears, giving them distemper vaccinations, a flea and tick, the revolution. They're doing a full workup. And the reason we do that is because we don't want to be moving these animals into other populated areas and jeopardizing the health of those animals in those areas. So we make sure that we have all of those things that is preventative before we move them so that the other animals in our care do not get sick. And every shelter will do that. They make sure that they take care of that right away.
And because it's my understanding that those are things that would normally be done by a veterinarian. So what doctor are they working under when they're doing that? Or is this something they don't need to work under anymore?
They don't have to. A vet tech can do the distemper vaccination. The vet has to do the rabies, which is done at the time of their spay and neuter surgery. So all of these things can be provided by a vet tech.
Okay. Again, I guess the only hesitation I have is that, you know, it's a huge increase, and it's a little difficult to swallow a giant increase at this, you know, this amount. A stepped increase would be more palatable in my mind, but is this, again, are we sending this to the council to discuss and make final decision, or is this just going to be, if we say, yeah, it's in the consent agenda and it's a done deal?
Well, yeah, the way we do a lot of things is be on the consent agenda, and it would be imperative for somebody to pull it off. It'll be called out as a separate line item.
But we could, if we wish to make a proviso that it be set on the agenda as a separate item. We can do that.
Absolutely.
That would be my preference. Again, this is a pretty significant increase.
agree.
I think I'd like to hear the entire council weigh in on it. rather than it just being buried in a consent agenda. I don't know if that has to be an amendment to the motion? No? Okay.
No,
You
I
can
don't think-
certainly do that, absolutely.
I guess my direction would be to put it in front of the council to discuss and make the decision, and I would be willing to vote to put it in front of the council
Okay.
as a
Go
separate
ahead,
item.
go ahead,
Yeah, I was
Steve.
gonna say, so where does this fit in the process of the motion that was already made?
Okay. Just one more question. Oh,
She's got to
go ahead,
clarify.
Deb.
I was just gonna clarify, we already have a motion. You're just asking us to place it separately on the common council agenda, so it does the
You
same
want to put an
thing.
amendment in there?
We don't need an amendment, because we're already sending it to common council.
Yeah,
You're just giving us direction how to place it on the common council agenda,
I would prefer it to be a specific item rather than just be
Right.
part of a consent agenda.
and we can do that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I didn't, you don't think we need an amendment then? Okay, thank you. All right. One last thing. Is there any room for negotiation on this?
There's always room for negotiation.
What?
There's always room for negotiation.
Okay, you're on tape. I got that. So, okay, that's good. Okay, any further questions? If not, all those in favor of sending this to the common council, placed as a separate item on the council agenda for the next council meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nays? So carried. Okay.
Yeah, and we're providing a service for the community, you guys know that. And so we're trying to be fair to ourselves and fair to the service that not only we are providing to these pet owners, but also the police department. If we aren't picking up these animals, they could, end up somewhere else and hopefully not in a deceased position, so.
Okay,
Because we just had that happen, unfortunately. So thank you for your time.
thank you. Next up is discuss options for assessing services starting in 2022. And Steve, you get this one.
Thank
Steve,
you.
I like your shirt. I didn't know you were doubling on the road crews this week.
Yeah, what goes around comes around. Didn't we start with assessing at the beginning of the night?
Yeah, we did. Full circle.
Well, yeah, Ron's gonna hand out a piece of paper. Don't focus on it yet, but I wanted to share this with you. Last year, the Finance Budget and Personnel Committee reviewed the options for assessing services. Now, if you remember, we signed a contract after many years with Joan Spencer as our in-house assessor, nearly 4 decades, actually. And Groda came on board, and they were with us for the back half of 2017, and then all of 2018, 19, and 20. So it was like a 3.5-year contract. Last year, after looking at the options, we extended with them for 1 more year. But the committee made it very clear that they wanted to look at other options, including in-house. So we bring it back to you now in the middle of May for that discussion. The options really haven't changed from last year. Really, I see 3 alternatives for this body and ultimately the council. One is to sign another extension, whether it be 2 years, 1 year, whatever, some extension to the original agreement we're operating under with Groda, presumably with some negotiated increase in price to reflect CPI or something. Number 2 would be solicit proposals from contract services. There's other people out there who do this. The sheet I just gave you, you'll be able to see several of them who are working for other communities. Or the third option is, of course, to look for an in-house assessor, which would have us updating the job description and then looking to hire a staff person. We bring this to you for review and discussion tonight to answer any questions you have, not necessarily for a decision, but I will tell you that Jen and Ron and I have talked about this, and we are certainly favorable to continuing for at least another year with Groda. We think this is a difficult time for us to look at changing. We have a $112 million request for exemption from the clinic. I know Jim's been working on this for a couple of years, and he's got a lot of information and background on it. There's some other cases coming down the road, that we think would be best not to change for the next 12 months as we get into 2022 and be able to handle these issues. But it's up to the discretion of the committee what you want to direct us to do.
Discussion. Okay. I guess I'll start it off and make some people mad and they'll yell at me, so that'll work out, I think. Basically, I've had some misgivings about the services we're getting in the past, and we've had that in the past couple of months. And I understand Steve's admonition that we're sort of between a rock and a hard place on some of the actual work being done in our behalf right now. The problem is, I don't know if it's gonna get any better. And I don't know, and I need to hear from the people who are directly involved in it with this as to what's the worst that could happen, or what do we need, how do we improve those services? And I don't know, I'm at this point not ready to make a recommendation, but I'm certainly willing to listen to anybody else's opinion on this. Steve, do you
Yeah.
have?
Well,
You've
that's a
been in the
good
meetings,
question.
You've known some of the dissatisfaction.
Yeah, and there have been some questions we've talked about that have been discussed by this body and the rest of the council. I guess I'll say this, the customer service type questions, dealing with citizen comments and whatnot, I think some of that is, things that happen as part of the position, the same way as building inspectors and other people who deal with the public have disagreements with people. But I understand the council's had some questions about whether or not things have always been handled the way they'd like to see. I think that's something we continue to work on or continue to discuss with Jim. I guess, I don't want the council to be dissatisfied with some of the things that they're hearing. If they hear a constituent say they don't feel they were treated right or didn't get the reduction that they think they were entitled to, or whatever it is. I just feel like we're as you said when you started talking, in a difficult position to change right now. And one of the things about finding a staff person, the reason I had that survey done, I looked at cities of 15 to 25,000 population, which are similar to us because we're right in the middle. I threw in Stevens Point because they're comparable to us in a lot of things, even though they're over 25. And this is a sum total. I mean, there were 3 cities I couldn't figure out from the website whether they had contract or in-house, but I couldn't find another in-house. So I think one of the challenges we might have, if we look for in-house, would be trying to find somebody. I'm told that there are fewer people going into the assessing field, unfortunately, among younger people. And that would be perhaps a challenge. Certainly the idea is there. Also the idea of looking at soliciting proposals from other firms. You see, as I said, you see several of them on that list of providers that service other communities. So the options are yours, but I think if it's some of the issues you've talked about in the past, I would suggest that we keep trying to work on them, share the concerns with the provider, and get some answers and try to move forward. And I know that there's been frustrations. I'm not trying to minimize it, believe me. I know that there have been a lot of questions raised on some of these past incidents that council has heard of.
Mr. Wetzel.
Thank you. I'll join in the fun here. I've always, in my mind, preferred in-house if possible. I think it's a great opportunity for folks to either grow into that position or, to maybe invite people to live within our community. I also think that when you're looking at in-house, it's probably cheaper than a contracted because in-house, you're paying for staff. Contracted, you're also paying for the administrative fees. So I guess, I would love to see at some point, I don't know if this is the right time. I don't know if we've got people that have been groomed for that position at this time. So I'm not necessarily saying let's do in-house now, but at the very least, I guess I'd like to see RFP, just because we've had some concerns and I'd like to know what else is out there. You mentioned it's a bad time. It's always going to be a bad time. There's always going to be somebody arguing about something, and maybe the argument at this moment is a little bit bigger than the argument will be next year, but there's always going to be an argument. There's always going to be a bad time, something that's happening that would cause us pause. I don't think that should be a deterrent from us doing what we need to do. And so, I guess like I said, I'd like to potentially see an RFP. I would like to see that RFP include not just the cost, but also some type of information about their customer service and those types of things to be pulled out, maybe some references provided, whatever it might be, because I want to make sure that we are doing what we can to provide the very best we can to the residents. Biggest complaint we get from residents, assessed values and property taxes. I think we need to do everything we can to make sure that we're providing them the very best service in those areas that we possibly can.
if I can just respond to that too, Keith is here, and he does a great job as our deputy city assessor, even though he's not looking at me at the moment. And I think that Jim is trying to work with him to kind of groom him and raise up his abilities and his, you know, his capacity to do the job, and maybe someday he'll be in a position where we'll look at him in that light. It's awkward having this conversation in front of him. But I think if we were looking outside right now to try and find a city assessor, as we had with Joan Spencer, it would probably be fairly difficult in central Wisconsin to land somebody. I got to believe that a number of these communities you're seeing on this list probably went that route before they ended up contracting with people like Accurate or Associated or someone like that. But, you know, again, that's just my thought.
I don't think it would hurt to do an RFP. I don't think it would. At least, I've been looking at this list, and I find that there's probably like maybe 5 or 6 different companies representing all of those.
Yeah.
And I think that the opportunity to get an RFP and to learn and to hear something about them, I think what Mr. Wetzel was talking about was references from communities they worked with, getting that along as part of the RFP. What I'd like to say, I'd like to see the administration prepare an RFP for our review at our next meeting, and bring it back, and we can take a look from there. Of course, Grota would be free to submit to an RFP also, and the council could make a decision from there. I don't know what I'm missing here. I think we generally don't have a lot of hesitation about putting stuff out for bid, even when we've had great relationships with people for years. I'm thinking of accounting firms. I'm thinking of audit firms. We had one audit firm for what, 22, 23 years, and we finally went out for RFPs and came out, and then we've changed twice since then, I think. So it's not unusual for us to do this, and it's probably, given the, how do I want to put that, the tenor of the council. I can't get much more poetic than that, but it's, you know, basically I know how the council feels about this, and I think we would be giving the council some options to look at that they might not have at the moment.
Well, and I think, you know, and I've spoken to this throughout my entire career, it's always a good thing to look at what's around you, what the other communities or what the other companies do, what their services are, what their prices are. That's a healthy thing that maybe the public sector doesn't do often enough. But I would be remiss in not bringing up, as I did earlier, what's on the line with the clinic case. And then just the fact that I think, Ron, you've said this before in past meetings, that there's evidence that Jim, working with Keith, that they've saved a lot for the city in terms of reductions and exemptions that maybe would have been more routinely approved in the past, that have been more scrutinized, which has been a benefit for us. So, but I respect the thought about doing a request for proposal. I rarely find myself arguing against that, because it's, you know, looking around is never a bad thing.
And what is to say, Steve, that a new face and a new company couldn't give us those same benefits that we were getting for the other firm? Ms. Spiros, you have a hand up, I think.
Yeah, I have a couple things also that I kind of want to weigh in on. So I looked at the list also. You had 20 listed, and just only 4 out of the 20 were not repeat companies, and we happen to be one of them. I mean, Grota only, you know, and all the surrounding companies you listed, we're the only one they represent. And I'm not saying one way or another on anything like that, but it's just odd to see that. And from your email, it looks like our contract is already,
Expired.
it says expired on December 31st, 2021.
If I said expired, I should have said expires.
Okay, so we
I
do have some
apologize.
time, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have some time. So that, I was a little confused. I didn't know if it was a typo and supposed to say 2020 that it expired, or that
No,
it expires in the future. Okay,
Correct.
so we have some time. Going back to the whole discussion with the issue with the clinic and things like that, obviously we've discussed this. I kind of like somebody with a little fire in their gut So I don't have a huge issue with some of that. But I do think that there's also nothing wrong with looking at requests for proposals. I don't think there's ever a reason to not look at them, especially if we have time. I think there's a reason to not look at them if we don't have time. If we're up against a clock and our contract's expired, but it looks like we have a little bit of time. I don't know how quickly we could get that RFP done and out and what we would be looking at. But I wouldn't mind going out for RFP if there's time before the end of this contract.
You know, I think I speak for Jen and Ron and all three of us. I mean, we'll have to move along. We'll definitely have to move along to do that. I probably should have brought this to you a couple months earlier, but there is time to make it happen.
So then I guess in follow-up, a suggestion to that, I would say that we probably should move along, because that would be my, my suggestion is that we go out for RFP and relook at this.
Can we don't need, we don't need a motion for that. We can just accept it as the consensus of the committee and ask the staff to take care of it.
Are you going to say something?
Sure.
Well, let me answer the question. I would like a motion because what I would like to do is put it under consent agenda as a bullet point for this committee saying, approve or authorize request for proposal.
Motion by Wetzel, second by Spiros. Discussion? Ron?
Sure, and, Steve's covered all the salient points for us too, but, I just wanted to pitch in, and from my point of view, an RFP is usually a good idea. I think Grota's been great and aggressive in defending the city interests, and we know where they stand on some of these big issues. And if we get someone else, we're not gonna know that until they're hired and in place. So I'm glad we're gonna take an RFP, but, I really would recommend we stick with Grota till we're through these kind of major issues.
Thank you. Ms. Spiros?
So Ron, just in follow-up to that comment, I believe, if we go out for RFP and we start to interview, we can kind of try to see where the companies we're interviewing do stand on some of these issues. Am I wrong on that, or is that how the process works?
Well, yeah, I don't know if you can ask them, would you support an exemption? It's a pretty hypothetical question. I think what'll have to happen, if in fact we were to leave Grota at some point, was there'd have to be some overlap where Jim would have to get somebody up to speed a little bit in terms of what he's found. He's got a lot of data, a lot of information on the rooms and how they're used and those kind of things. I think for somebody to just hypothetically say, oh yeah, no, I'd stand for the city. I'd fight that exemption request to the death. They wouldn't have a lot of information to go on with that.
We have a motion and a second on the floor to go out for RFPs. Some discussion, any more discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. And the last item, I think it's the last item on the agenda, is that items for next meeting? No. Oh, yeah, what do you want?
Future agenda item.
Okay.
It kind of came to my mind as we were talking pet shelters and contracts and holding periods and all that stuff. I would like to see if we can look into the pet licensing in the city. It is my understanding that we do the yearly license, but it is further my understanding that we could go to a multi-year license, and I would like us to look into that to see what options we would have. I actually think that it would be more convenient for most people. It actually may be a little bit of a moneymaker, because if you license your pet for 3 years, that goes along with the rabies tag, and the pet doesn't make it the full 3 years, well, you've made a little extra money, I guess. So I would like to see what options we have for a multi-year pet license and what we can do about that.
Okay, we'll have that. Can you make note of that, please? Okay. Except for the part about, well, no, any further items for other agendas? If not, motion to adjourn by Spiro, second by Paschal. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We stand adjourned.